to this episode of the Erasing Shame podcast. I'm your co-host, DJ Chuang, and today I'm sitting with Naomi Smith, who is in Atlanta, Georgia, and I got to meet her at an Asian American Mental Health Summit back in March, right around the third anniversary of the Atlanta spa murders. And she's a filmmaker, and part of her story really caught my attention because it's so viscerally and poignantly related to mental health and the struggle we have with living well. So, Naomi, thank you for joining me on this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And being a filmmaker, you're a tremendous storyteller, and your own life story is quite a story. And we have about half an hour to just take a couple of vignettes, and what you're comfortable to share, you are free to share. So, what comes to mind when you hear the word shame?
Shame. Shame is shame on who I am. And so let me start from the beginning. I am biracial, but I was primarily only raised by my mom, who's an immigrant. She immigrated from Hong Kong to America. And she tried her best to teach me the culture of being, what does it mean to be Chinese? And I loved everything she was teaching me, but I was very shameful in school because there were not a lot of Asians or even biracials at all. And I spent the next 15 years of my life in deep shame of not wanting to be Asian or Chinese. I wanted to be like everyone else around me. I wanted to blend in and I didn't want to stick out. I wanted to eat the same way as everyone, but my love for American food wasn't strong because my mom always made home cooked meals, always introduced me to all sorts of foods. I like so many different kinds of foods that even some of my Chinese friends, oh, you're more Chinese than me. I would never eat that. And it felt strange to be stuck in the middle, to never be Asian enough for Asians or to never be white enough for whites. I didn't know what it was like to be American, but I definitely know what it's like to be in the in between of never feeling like I have anywhere to belong.
That is a painful and difficult place to be. But what made it shameful?
What made it shameful is the bullying, the constant
Mm,
bullying. What made it shameful is kids making fun of my snacks or my lunch or the food I eat, like calling it smelly or something like that, or be like, why do you eat that? What kind of food is this? And it's nothing strange to me. I didn't think it was strange. Like, sharing dim sum with friends and are like, what is this? And they don't understand food the way that I did, which is just exploring and being adventurous or just trying something new. Like I taught myself when I was younger to not judge anything until you try it. And I was quite shocked and felt like I was put in shame of my own culture because people didn't like it. They would make fun of the language. They'd be like, try to say something in Chinese, and then I did, and then they would laugh at me. Um,
I'm sorry.
they would make fun of my mom's accent. And my mom eventually she got close to her partner that she was with for a number of years in my childhood. She would ask him to go to the parent teacher conference as instead of her because she felt like the teachers would be more honest or they would respect him because he was white versus my mom is Asian. Um, the bullying never stopped. Different kinds of bullying, all sorts from my eyes to my face to my culture, behavior to the way I dressed to me having glasses. You know, kids can be quite cruel and they don't know the kind of long-term damage it will cause to an individual. So I felt like I wanted to give up many times in my life of making it all stop because I thought it would be easier. And so I would say trying to find hope within all of that with friends that I do have. And my mom never gave up on me. And I think her fight of wanting me to love myself became a constant battle over and over again.
Well, when I came to the US, I was 8 years old, and I'm the oldest of three boys. And my mom did not know how to cook until she came to America,
Oh, wow.
because apparently we were wealthy enough to have hired help in Taiwan, where I was born. And hearing your story makes me wonder, oh, your mom actually is a pretty good cook, maybe even chef. And I know food is such a big part of your story, so we'll get into that. And I'm wondering when was the turning point when food and your family of origin become a valuable thing instead of a shameful thing?
There's a lot of little turning points. There was some turning points probably after 14, 16 years old when I started to meet more Chinese individuals and Asian individuals in my high school because I went to, my high school was a magnet school, so I had a lot of international students. And I became attached to a lot of the magnet students, even though I was not a magnet student myself. The teachers would overlap, and so I got to know a lot of teachers that teach the International Baccalaureate program, and I would like to talk to a lot of them because I craved curiosity and education, and I felt like I wasn't given the right opportunities, and I always kept asking questions. I would talk to a lot of people about what do they cook at home, what do they like, and it there was always a sense of love with all Asian cultures when it comes to food, and especially with my friends. I can see like, oh, they eat the same food that I do. They like the same snacks that I like. They like fresh food. Their mom does cook at home. It's not pizza. It's not like hamburger and hot dogs and fries and chicken nuggets. Like those are still good, but that's not the primary core of like Asians. Like I'm sure we all do
Hmm.
it at some point, but the love of home cooked meals or good food, fresh ingredients, having a lot more greens, fresh greens, not just steamed broccoli or overcooked collard greens in the Southern culture. Um, but it's interesting that, I would say the biggest turning point as the most recent years was in 2020 when I was stuck not being able to go to the grocery store. So I do one big trip to
Mm.
a Chinese farmers market and the Korean farmers market, grab everything that I could that would last for
Hmm.
weeks and be as fresh. And I learned how to just take care of myself because I wasn't close to my mom and I knew home cooked meals wasn't going to be uh, fresh from her. So I learned to really start taking all of my mom's home cooked meals and I would talk to her over the phone and I'd be like, how do you cook this? How do you cook this? And we really bonded over COVID because like I really actively wanted those recipes from her.
Mm. Mm.
And in in 2021, I was diagnosed with PCOS. And
Mm.
PCOS is polycystic ovarian syndrome.
Oh my.
And I had no idea what that was. And when the doctor said I would have it for the rest of my life and I couldn't do anything about it, and they gave me like a stack of 10 sheets of paper with lots of information on it. And they're like, here you go. And I'm like traumatized. I'm like, I don't know what just happened. And the odd request I asked my OGBYN is like, I would like to be diagnosed if I have this condition. They're like, why would you think you had this condition? And I said, well, four other professionals said they can't diagnose me because they're not an OGBYN, but they're 100% sure that I have this. And they were like, okay. She gave me a series of 10 questions. I answered them in great detail. Then she did an ultrasound and then she did a blood test, and that's all it takes. And then she says, there's a chance you've had this your entire life. And I said, why now? Why now that these symptoms are showing? And she said, well, what has changed in your life? And in that moment, I was working a lot. Once again, I was just
Mhm.
overworking and stressed out, anxiety. But I said to her, I haven't seen my mom often this year. She's like, what do you mean? And I said, I primarily used to eat at home a lot more than I do now because of
Mhm.
working. You tend to eat things
Mhm.
that are out and about or convenient to you,
Mhm.
frozen food or fast food or
Mhm.
anything
Mhm.
of like that that you can get easily that I would just take home. And if I wasn't near um, Chinese or Korean or even Japanese foods, which they're usually quite far away from me, at least 25 minutes down the highway, and that's without traffic. um, it's a lot harder for where I live that I just don't have fresh ingredients all the time, or things aren't heavily sauced or seasoned.
Mhm.
My mom had always flavor in her food, but it wasn't dark and it wasn't heavily seasoned. And I said to my OGBYN, I said to her, I think I stopped eating as much Asian food. And she looked at me with curiosity and she's like, well, what did you grow up eating? And named it all. And then I realized, and I think that's in that moment of 2021 where I'm like, oh my gosh, the reason why I'm showing symptoms is because my body is inflamed, my stress is skyrocketed.
Mhm.
And I immediately went online and I joined all these different forums of women who have this. I started researching, what do women who have this condition, what do they eat?
Mhm.
I found many information about it. But what also caught my interest is there wasn't Asian food on there because a lot of women who are talking about this is American,
Mhm.
white, Black, Hispanic, but there weren't a lot of Asians talking about this. So I started documenting all the foods that made me feel physically really good. So many fresh ingredients. Probably the whole aisle of the vegetable aisle for Chinese, Korean, Japanese, those foods, all those vegetables there, they're a key factor in my diet now
Mhm. Mhm.
and a key factor in my mental health.
Mhm.
And I started tying everything, my love for food and understanding that these ingredients are vital and important to our mental health and to our well-being. And I try to do like go out of my way to get fresh food as much as I can. And I would say it's still challenging because the
Mhm.
luxury is time.
Mhm.
And sometimes you don't have the time to always cook fresh meals. So now I do meal preps to
Mhm.
there is a freezer, an extra freezer where you can freeze some of these fresh vegetables so you don't waste them and then you can just drop them into some soup. But in general, food is important. And
Mhm.
in a way, I feel really sad that I realized it so late in my life how important it was. I could have changed it earlier on. And I'm glad now, at least I still know it's never too late to
Mhm.
really understand,
Mhm.
to know that I have this condition forever. And it has a lot to do with inflammation of my ovaries. And um, both of my ovaries look like they have chicken pox. They are covered in
Wow.
tiny cysts.
Wow.
That's what I looked at in my ultrasound. Like the doctor kind of broke it down for me. The nurse kind of broke it down for me. And I was like, well, my best thing I can do is get rid of inflammation. And it made me think, it really made me think, my ovaries are inflamed, what other organs are as well. What have I done to my body? What can stress do? And, being diagnosed with anxiety disorder at the age of 14 and severe depression, though I believe I've had depression since the age of 7 due to the intense amount of bullying that was never stopped by teachers. I always ask myself questions of why didn't the teachers do anything? Why did they not stop the student? Did they not understand what the student was doing was cruel? And there's so many moments in my life where I'm like, an adult could have stepped in and helped, but they didn't.
I'm sorry to hear all the pain and hardship you've gone through. And I suppose at this point, I want to issue a content warning and trigger warning because we're going to talk about suicide and suicide attempts. And we're kind of going forward in time and backward in time as they do in filmmaking. And you probably have better terminology to describe that. But as you've described some of the mental health challenges you've experienced, that also took you to a place where you attempted suicide 7 times. And we don't need to review every single one, and you're free to talk as much or as little as you'd like, but how did you get through all of that?
Um, how did I get through it? Well, I
I mean,
can
it
talk.
might be one at a time or a particular few. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a
Um,
hard thing to go through.
Absolutely. It really is. I can talk about the first one. I was 14. I was diagnosed with anxiety disorder and depression. And a psychiatrist told my mom that they're going to prescribe me on this medicine called Zoloft. There wasn't too much research at the time, or maybe there was, and my mom didn't look into it. Um, and around, it was still within the school year, or maybe it just got out. The memory's a little fuzzy with that one. I can't tell if it was right around when school got out and it was in the summer, but I do remember being in rehab in the summer. And um, I went up to my mom, and this is the part I do remember because I had to talk about it so many times to at least 4 or 5 different doctors, and they keep asking me to describe in detail what happened. And I said, "This is how I told the story, and this is still all what I remember is I went up to my mom and I said, today I'm gonna die." And she's like, "Naomi, that's not funny." And I was like, 5 minutes ago, I decided to take 700 milligrams of Zoloft. I stood there in front of her. She looked at me and I looked at her. And she's like, "Naomi, we're gonna go to the hospital now." She did find the bottle in the bathroom. I took all the rest of the pills that I had from the bottle, and she knew I wasn't lying. Our house was quite small, so you can hear everything. She took me to the hospital. She dropped me off at the front when she went to go find parking. I was kind of very dizzy and started to feel strange. The mixture was feeling flushed, started sweating a lot on my side of my face. And I went up to the counter where you would check in. And, I said, "My mom is parking right now." They're like, "What are you here for?" And I was like, "I just overdosed on my depression medication, Zoloft." And they looked at me and everyone like stopped 2 to 3 women looked at me and they said, "Well, what's your name?" And they asked for my name and gave it to them. And they're like, "Well, how much did you take?" And I said, "Well, I took the rest of the bottles. There were 7 pills in there, and it's been about 25 minutes from the drive from my house to the Children's Hospital, which also used to be Scottish Rite Hospital here in Atlanta." They all stopped what they were doing. One woman ran off somewhere. They brought back a wheelchair. They had me sit. They immediately took my weight and my temperature. Um, it's it was very strange. I looked around and I felt a sense of shame because the hospital was full of people. And I felt shame that my life was more valued than others. And I was put on a bed and they walked me through everything. And they pumped uh, 8 or 10 pounds of charcoal
Mhm. Mhm.
into my stomach. They asked me as a permission, "Do you want the tube through your mouth or through your nose?" And I'm like, "I'm not sure which one's better." And they picked for me and they went through my nose and down. And I stayed at the hospital for maybe 10, 12 hours, maybe longer. By the time everything was done, it was about 2 or 3 in the morning. And they said to my mom, I overheard them, and they said, "We cannot release your daughter back to you. She has to go to like a rehab center." My mom asked them how long, and the doctor says, "I'm not sure. Not sure in her case." So in that moment, I was driven to this place that I've never been, don't know where I was going. All my clothes were taken away from me, all of my jewelry. I think what hurt the most was my mom gave me this necklace that was blessed by the monks, the Chinese monks, and she always said it would be a protection for me. So when my necklace got taken away, it was
Mhm.
very hard that I didn't have a single thing with me
Mhm.
that could even protect me, or I
Mhm.
don't know, anything that would make me feel a sense of home, because that's what's stripped from you. Remember, I'm 14. I am probably around 85 pounds. And I would say it was so strange. And to sum up the experience, it wasn't a good one. In the rehab center, I met a lot of individuals and a lot of people with a lot of different serious issues as well. And for some reason, I didn't look at mine as an issue. I didn't look at my issue as something that was valued because I didn't understand how bad it was. No one in that rehab center was in there because of suicide. So I felt
Mhm.
really out of place.
Mhm.
And I learned a lot about different people in their situation. And the only thing I kept telling myself is, how long will I be here? And I have to give the doctors exactly what they want, which is they want to hear my story. I've never had my story be said to anybody, so I decided to just tell it over and over and over again. they would always come back to me with same questions. I would always give them the same answer because I think what they were looking for is consistency or truth. Then they asked me, "Is not having a father, did that affect you?" And I'm like, "I'm not sure. I don't know what it's like to have a dad. So what do you want me to say?" Then they made me write an essay explaining how missing a father, not having a father figure in my life could be the part of my neurological dysfunction of being sad. Out of everything I said to them, bullying to me not getting along with my mom because I wanted to be a different race. Not a single person in there was even Asian, not any Asian doctors. I was having a severe identity crisis and it was very overlooked.
Mm, mhm,
I wanted to love myself, but instead, they wanted me to explain how not having a dad would affect my mind. Though my mom's partner was a very good father figure, very caring and loving. Um, but there was so much hate with his family against him being with my mom, but he stayed with my mom. And it was so strange. And I asked my mom, I was like, how can you be with someone when their family doesn't even like you for your race? That's that's not fair. And she's like, he's a grown man. He can do what he likes. And he wants to be with me and I want to be with him. And my mom would say, when you get older, you will understand. And then I realized as you get older, you do have choices. You get to choose who you want to be with. But my mom's view on the world was very confusing for me. She never wanted to defend herself when someone was treating her disrespectfully. She told me not to be angry, but how could I not when I witnessed over and over again how people treated my mom?
mm, mhm,
And my mom would tell me, this is not your battle to fight. Try not to be angry and understand. There's not much you can do. And I asked her after I get out of rehab, and I will ask her all these questions, usually when we're in a heated argument. Why did you not choose a community with people like me?
mm,
Why do you not choose even more Asians so I can be exposed to more kinds of people than the people who choose to heavily make fun of a culture that I don't even understand fully? Because remember, my mom's raising me.
mm,
She's only telling me everything that she loved, from the food to culture to language. And I only know pieces of it through the friends that I had. But back on the rehab, I was forced to always have group therapy.
mhm,
They say it's a choice, but they get upset if you choose to not do it.
mhm,
And doing group therapy was like, whose situation was the worst?
mm,
Being in a room of over 20 people or so, men and women, all under 18, or really boys and girls, all under 18, various age groups, various, backgrounds, primarily white and black. I was the only Asian or Asian descent in the group. And everyone's just kind of like, oh, let's talk about my problem in the worst way. You would introduce yourself and you would say why you were there. And no one else said suicide, and I'm the only one who says a suicide attempt. And the therapist would go around and ask questions, and everyone would try to answer them to the best of their ability. But with a room with that many people, that individual's not going to be able to say a lot. It's a summary, maybe 1 to 2 sentences, every answer, every question.
Mm-hmm.
And what I learned is I felt once again shame and guilty for wanting to take my life and wanting to get along with my mom, but didn't know how to. And started to feel a deep shame of putting my mom through this experience. And then wondering if she could have helped me in any of it. Your parents don't go to school with you, they don't witness half the things that you experience. I can only tell my mom the students doing this to me, or saying this, or stealing my things, or hitting me, and the teachers didn't do anything. Before that attempt, a couple of years from the suicide attempt, when I first discovered I needed glasses, it was in 6th grade. It was my science teacher. I won't name her, but she wouldn't let me sit in the front. She would always put me in the back of the room.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was very strange. I said to her I couldn't see the board. I can't read what's there. Can I sit to the front to take notes? And she said no. And I became so distraught. I'm like, I'm not doing anything wrong. I would like to. I would like to learn and take notes. Eventually, I didn't want to be a bother to the teacher because I asked her numerous times, could I sit on the floor in front of the board because I can't read it? And I would just take notes from my friends' like notebooks if they remembered to let me see their notes versus, forgetting and then class ends. Anyways, it got so bad that I did tell my mom. And then that's when my mom realized that I needed glasses. When I got glasses, I don't know how long I needed glasses, but I would say it was probably up to 3 to 6 months of needing glasses, and I was just struggling, not being able to read. Everything was just so fuzzy, or words would blend together, couldn't make out what I was taking notes, but I was sitting in the very, very back of the class. She put me in a desk where it's usually 2 people. But no, I was by myself. And I kept asking myself, why did I deserve it? I don't understand what I did wrong. Why did she favor other students and treat them better? I was very quiet, shy, very timid. I would say I was less than 85 pounds in 7th grade. I think I stayed 85 pounds to 89 to 90 pounds, probably for 8 years. I ate a lot, but I also realized I was always hungry, and teachers wouldn't let me eat snacks in the classroom. It wouldn't even be noisy. I just needed something in my stomach. My metabolism was really high, to the point where I wasn't eating a big, like, not a big, huge breakfast, but like in the 90s, did you just there was a cereal and milk and maybe
Mhm.
other little things. That's not a
Mhm.
breakfast. You know what I eat for breakfast now? Like right before, like I talked to you a few hours ago, he had a huge hearty vegetable soup
Mhm.
with fresh dumplings.
Mhm.
That's my breakfast, like hearty and high protein. And I still go for a high protein diet because it helps my brain. It helps me think better in the morning. Thinking back to all of my school years, all the report cards saying, whatever they would say from Naomi is talkative or disruptive. But usually it's because I needed notes because the teacher was not letting me catch up. But of course, it was a class full of kids. I would always ask my friends for notes because I was trying to catch up. Or Naomi's really tired. She's sleeping in class. I would say that's a common one too. No one asked why I was tired. No one wondered if I was okay. I don't think I was okay for a very long time, but mental health wasn't a priority and during that time. After 18, I spent a lot of my years reading and reading many books. Google Scholar was a very common thing I like to look up. I think I looked up how to get rid of depression so many different times, reading many, many different things of what is depression? How do you cope with it? All the coping skills with depression and anxiety. Trying to help my anxiety, trying to help my depression, didn't know which one to do first, but learning a lot of great things. My story is sad, but there is a positive that my curiosity never stopped, and I never stopped asking the right questions and trying to help myself because I felt like a lot of the doctors didn't quite know how to help me, or they didn't guide me in the right place, or maybe they didn't know how to help my mom. Or I've had 4 psychiatrists and 4 psychologists. My mom spent so much money trying to get tests done, and how could all of them overlook, I don't know, lifestyle, food? How could they overlook social skills and you know other important factors for a child's well-being? After all of my research in say over a decade of constantly reading self-help books to the point where I just recently learned a new term that there is toxic positivity.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I was like, when I came across that term, I was like, oh my gosh, that is definitely a real thing. And then I learned that bombarding yourself with information can be overwhelming. And you don't know what works if you're trying too many solutions to a problem. So I
Mhm.
approached it differently. And 4 years ago, I decided to do therapy again after having maybe 15 different therapists in my life, trying different people out and seeing what would work, what wouldn't. After I got off of my mom's insurance in my early 20s, and I couldn't provide mental health care for myself. But then 4 years ago, I decided to type in Google Chinese therapist in Atlanta, and at 1 in the morning on a Sunday, I wrote her an email. She got back to me in 2 days where I found someone. I read her credentials, I read her school and her specialty. And the first thing that caught my interest with her bio is the fact that she says helping individuals with like Asian identity crisis and immigrant parenting or parents. And like she had all these other specialties too, but those two stood out the most. to where I'm like, wow, I've never met a therapist that specializes in an individual that had immigrant parents on top of an individual that needs like or has identity crisis, which I have those things on top of many other issues that I've been battling as an adult. And the positive thing is I still see her every week. Just saw her yesterday. And I am very happy to know that I'm consistent with my mental health and I haven't given up on myself, even though I have tried to attempt suicide several times. The first one was most vivid. The other ones, they're a little bit of a blur because I think I've buried it so deep in my brain that there are a lot of things I don't like to remember because they're painful. The first one, I had to reiterate over and over again to doctors that that one's just the most vivid for me. Overdosing was the only time I ever did for Zoloft. And I know I'm kind of going around in different, like jumping around to different topics, but my mom took me off of Zoloft immediately. And she promised to me that I wouldn't be put on a medication like that again unless I was okay with it. And she tried other things to try to be more involved and try to talk to me more, allow me to see my friends more. There was a different approach. And I think that helped. It made me not feel so different. I did kept it a secret from most of my friends. I don't think anyone ever even knew that I was seeing a specialist or that I was even on antidepressants when I was younger because not many kids were. And if you were looked at as different instead of the same. And I didn't want to be different. I would try really, really hard not to be different. I just wanted to fit in. I wanted to have friends. I wanted to be liked for me. And during that time, I was generally quite quiet and timid, and it's hard for me to make friends.
Well, I want to give you as much space and time to share your story. I'm in no hurry.
Thanks.
We don't have a therapist clock running for 50 minutes. And that's the beauty of podcasting, at least the way we do it here, is we don't have a running clock. There's no amount of film that's going to run out.
Yeah.
So thank you for being open and feeling safe enough to share and having the courage to share, because we know that this is going to be public.
Absolutely.
And my first response is, you're a living miracle. And my prayer and my wish is that you would live long and well and healthy, to encourage others to fight the good fight when life gets hard. And when life gets hard, it looks different for each of us, but hard is still hard. And I've found in our podcast conversations, we've found that when people share their stories of going through those hardships, that we can know that there's some sense of hope and we're not alone. And when we hear those stories from someone that looks like us, it just resonates much more deeply. And I know it's been a little more elusive for me to find someone from a biracial background to share their journeys through life. And so I really thank you for sharing a part of your life with us, because it will be life-giving for others.
Thank you.
Now, the question I had mentioned to you when we last talked in Atlanta was that as a mental health advocate myself, going for about 5 years now, and I've lived with bipolar disorder for 23 years. And the first 10 years was a private, quiet, and heavy journey. But as I've found support and wellness to go public with my story. I realize it helps people when I go public with my story. And so that's been part of my growth in becoming more of an advocate and learning to use digital medias to be an advocate for that. And you're doing that through media, through filmmaking and storytelling as well. One of the questions I've been curious about in the world we're living in, there's a lot of research and effort towards suicide prevention and using evidence-based and research kind of things is helpful in one degree, but I find it more compelling to hear firsthand from people who've gone through those challenges. And I was wondering what you would what what you would say that's helped you to find life worth living after so many cries for help and wishing the pain would end. Now, I'm not going to leap forward and say that you don't still have dark thoughts. I'm guessing that your season of dark thoughts is no longer so dark anymore, that you've found things to help you be resilient and to stay healthy and to do healthy habits, like you mentioned, talking with your therapist weekly and eating healthy. What would you have to say for those who are struggling with not belonging and life being so hard and wondering if suicidal ideation, those thoughts just won't go away and they need to find some sense of hope to get through and get out of that?
Well, my hope is, you know, my mom. I watched her never give up on me. It helped me start to remember to not give up on myself either so easily, because giving up seems to be an easier route. I know myself well enough that it's going to be a challenge. And I wanted to know more about myself. How do I process information? And why do I process it the way that I process it? And I want to understand. I've come to realize as an adult, I suffer from severe ADHD as well. That is another diagnosis that I think is heavily overlooked, especially in the Asian community. When I discovered that maybe I have ADHD, I really looked into it and I started to read about habits and coping skills that will help me. Once I started coping with my ADHD, once I started coping with my anxiety and my depression, and those coping skills would be as simple things as drink enough water throughout the day, not only eat healthy. The biggest thing I've changed probably since the pandemic till now, which isn't not even that long ago. The pandemic in 2020 was the most I've ever slept in my life. That was consistent of 8 to 9 hours of sleep. Wow, what a life changer to have so much sleep. Like I said, Google Scholar is such a great thing that it says America is sleep deprived on top of chronic dehydration. There are a lot of studies that focus on those things for Americans. When you combat those two things and you stay consistent, your brain starts to change. I spoke to a neurologist, Dr. Malinsky. He stated that if your brain is dehydrated, 10% of severe dehydration, your brain will shrink. Imagine your brain shrinking 10% smaller because you're severely dehydrated. That's alarming. So properly hydrating yourself. These are the things that I removed out of my diet entirely. I removed all sodas. I don't eat actually any candy. or not too much, at least. If I do, it'd be like a piece of dark chocolate here and there. Doesn't seem that boring. I'll sometimes take little bits and pieces every now and then, but sugar and candy, I don't do. I guess it includes soda now. I still have very full, flavorful meals. I mean, the ice creams that I do eat wouldn't be like cream base itself because I have lactose intolerant, but I do like the brand So Delicious with cashew milk and coconut milk ice cream, which is still very good. Um, I'm over here always drinking like cold pressed juices every now and then. But the other thing that I completely changed was I have a full breakfast. Not everyone. Know your body. I really had to know my body. I started documenting my body, talking to professionals. If you have the ability to see a nutritionalist, find out what you are lacking. Get a blood test. Are you lacking any vitamins? What do you need? I found out since I have PCOS, my cortisol is very low. My testosterone is quite high. I started changing the types of food I am eating to balance my hormones. Oh my God, what a life changer. What do you think since my PCOS now? You know, I I had my first period at 12. If I had PCOS that ran in my family, not knowing, and suffering through PCOS my entire time from 12 to now, or when I got diagnosed, which I was 30 when I got diagnosed for PCOS, I would have loved to know that I had PCOS when I was younger, so I would have been able to change some of my eating habits then. I think that would have helped. I found out I needed a high protein diet. That works for me. It won't work for everyone, but it changed my brain chemistry to eat the proper amount of protein daily. I had the energy. I wasn't tired anymore. I had the energy to do things. I also, for me, this is not for everyone. I know it's going to be a controversial topic for some when I say this out loud, but I took away coffee for 6 years. Coffee for someone who has anxiety doesn't help. I took it away slowly. I still had caffeine in my diet, but it was black tea. Then I went to green tea. Then I went to white tea. Then I went herbal. Primarily drink herbal. The types of tea I focus on is burdock tea, corn silk tea, rose. What other teas do I have? Occasionally, I will have matcha. I don't have caffeine after 2 p.m. I'm very, very disciplined in my body. And now I know what I need to do that helps with all the things that make me a better person. How do I work better? I was reading all of these different books. I'll pull one of the books out. This is a book that I like to read. It's the Harvard Business Reviews, or this one, they have one that focuses on happiness. This one is influence and precision. It's all emotional intelligence.
Good stuff.
I kept trying to read books on emotional intelligence, and I was trying to tie in different books relating to emotional intelligence, lifestyle, food. Then I've just finished this book, Brain Food by Dr. Lisa Muscati.
Mm-hmm.
She said a lot of very important things that I have never heard in my whole life, like just never even thought that that was possible. And to read a statement in her book that says a lot of neurologists still believe that food isn't tied into brain health, that's shocking. That's absolutely shocking. Then I watched this documentary on Netflix about the blue zones and learning that there's a whole groups of people around the world that can live to 100 plus. After the many times that I have lived not knowing where I wanted to go, not knowing if I had a future. I didn't want to think that way anymore. I started little goals, little simple goals that help me be a better person for myself, not for anyone else. You have to choose this for yourself. You have to choose, like, what can I do today that will make me happy? Choose the things that will be as simple as maybe writing, journaling. Those are effective. On top of, if you really like art, any form of art, whether making music, painting, mixed media, express yourself thoroughly. Name it, describe it. You don't have to share it with anyone if you're not ready, but it does help to do various forms of art for yourself. Don't hold in your feelings. I think the biggest thing I've learned in my life is don't be afraid to be vulnerable and to share yourself with someone you really trust, whether it's a medical professional, a family friend, your family, your actual best friends. If they really support you, they will hear you out. Some of them might not give the greatest advice because some people don't know what to do with difficulty, especially when it comes to thinking dark thoughts. That's a hard one for a lot of people. But one thing I learned from all the research I love reading about is dark thoughts are very normal. Everyone has them. Intrusive thoughts is what they're called. They come and go. You know, you can have intrusive thoughts in the middle of traffic because you're just trying to get home. You can have intrusive thoughts because someone just treated you badly at work and you want to get back at them. And then it comes in your mind and then it goes because you don't actually want to do it. You don't want to do anything that causes these thoughts. They just happen. And fighting that urge to try to suppress those thoughts, the biggest thing is don't take action on those thoughts. Maybe express it in writing or an art form is better. But, you know, also talking to that person if you are able to talk to them. Like if a coworker upset you, go up to them, be like, "What you said to me yesterday, it really upset me," and see what they have to say. I'm like, "I'm sorry if you're having a bad day, but don't put it on me. I didn't do anything." If you can do that, if they are the right person and you know that they can handle that, that'd be fine too.
Mhm.
But I mean, I know it's easier said than done. But if you're in a toxic work environment, I would say when I was younger, the different kinds of jobs that I had, I left them. I wouldn't say that's the answer for everyone, no. I mean, I was 16 on my first job and I worked at Panera Bread and it was very toxic, so I left it. You know, I told the manager, I was like, "I don't know what's happening and what's going on, but I'm being blamed for things that I did not do. And I don't like being framed for something if someone else is causing issues." I looked at him in a private message at the manager's office and I said, "You know, these issues are going to keep happening whether I'm here or not, but I'm going to walk out." I walked out and I just turned around and I went to go find another job because I was 16. I was just trying to make it into the adult world and I learned really fast that it's difficult. I didn't want to be there forever. That was not the job that I thought I would have. It was just part-time summer job. And seems to be plenty of jobs, at least back then when I was a teenager. But now as an adult in my mid-30s, it's not that easy to just walk away from a job. It's not easy. I'm in a different situation being a freelancer. For the last 8 years, I get to choose the jobs that I want to be a part of. Get to be my own boss, which is a lot harder, constantly budgeting, constantly trying to figure out where is going to be my next job. But I've taught myself a lot of different disciplines. And for me, my individualness, my personality, structure and discipline works for me. It wasn't something I necessarily was taught. My mom tried to instill discipline quite young. When you're a child and your parents are trying to instill discipline to you, you want to resist it. Believe me, I was a very rebellious child that my mom eventually couldn't put discipline onto me and she gave up a little bit. Remember, she was an only parent. Like she was my only parent for a number of years in my life. So, she had other things to worry about. And then when I finally realized how important discipline was, especially what I was eating, getting up early, as simple as a discipline of making your bed. At the end of the day, how fulfilling it is to come to your bed and just say, it's made. And you get to sleep in the comfort of your home. That's nice. You know, being tidy. I've learned that if my home is chaotic and messy, it's not a way to live. You want you want to organize things and where things are not on the floor and put things back to where they should be. Put the laundry in the hamper. Simple things like that will change your perspective. Staying tidy and clean will help you as an individual. Those are the simple disciplines. If you can do that, you can do a number of other things too. But of course, when I first started in my journey of trying to help myself, I remembered all the things that my mom did teach me when I was younger. And and I think learning how much my mom loved me and remembering these moments of love, care, and hope, you don't you don't forget it because when you start to remember those little moments, they're important. You also start to remember the love and care of your friends. And that's why I keep going, not only for others, but I have now dreams and goals that I would like to complete. This time I have longer term goals and I hope that they all come true. I hope I get to do very fulfilling things throughout my life that encourages people, inspires others. I really love teaching, at least others in my field in the film industry. I care a lot. And I think it comes from people not necessarily caring when I was younger in school. I only had a handful of teachers that remotely said that I had potential. And I held on to that word for dear life,
Mhm.
the potential to do something. But sometimes you don't always have a manual telling you where you should go and how you should do it. You
Mhm.
can figure it out yourself.
Mhm.
But changing my thought process, allowing myself to feel, be vulnerable, be sad, and be angry. I don't resent myself for those feelings because I think it's absolutely okay to not be okay sometimes and be honest to yourself. Without that honesty, it would be a lot harder because you cannot dismiss your own self and hide away without knowing that sometimes you need a little bit of guidance from others, professionally, from your friends or
Mhm.
family, if you trust them. But
Mhm.
you also have to give them the trust. And for me, I built up the trust with my therapist. I didn't tell her everything in the beginning. I built it up slowly. And I started being more vulnerable and honest to my friends. And I found out they don't get upset at the fact that I'm honest. And I really, really like that. And with my mom, my relationship with her has improved. I wouldn't say it's at its best yet, but it has improved to where I do see her. I cook for her. She cooks for me. I treat her out to her favorite restaurant when it's a special occasion. And I know my mom's like love language. Hers is quality time. You give her a good meal, you let her talk about her day and what's going on in her life. It gives her so much love. And and she's happy. And seeing her happy, I think, gives me that sense of comfort. For me, my happiness is knowing my limits, knowing when I need to spend time for myself, knowing where my stress level is at, and doing something about it, whether exercising, painting, doing yoga. I'll just cook randomly because my love is actually in cooking. Cook randomly,
Mm.
enjoy my own food that I've made.
Well, my love language is quality food and eating, so I think we can get along.
Yes. So know yourself. I think that's an important aspect because I think when I was in many parts of my life, I feel like I didn't know what I wanted. I guess to write it all down, write down everything, to see it on paper and see like, what do you really want? If you want happiness, how do you get there? What makes you feel happy? What makes you feel safe and secure? Try to find the answers to those words and slowly get there. It's baby steps. I think I had to remind myself a million times, baby steps, baby steps. You have your own time and your own path. You're not following anyone else's. Give yourself grace and give yourself appreciation and gratitude.
Thank you. I'm so grateful you've done all that hard work to find a life that is meaningful to you. And now it's overflowing to be helpful to others. Thank you for sharing the time here. And as they say in a popular podcast, Act 3.
Thank you so
So
much.
you've, in Act 3, I want to give you some time to share about how you've become a because filmmaking is a very challenging kind of work. It's not a 9 to 5 job. It's very entrepreneurial. So you're having to, as you mentioned, go from project to project and budgeting and doing a lot of legwork. And it's not particularly a kind of job that the typical Asian family aspires their children to do. So how have you found your way there? And I know there's a convergence of your filmmaking and food, all that gives life to you and how you're making a contribution to the world. And that's how I'd like to close out our time together to share the passion project you've already started and maybe some of the other film projects you're working on.
Sure. The project that I started is called I Love You. It's a love story for my grandmother. This story is about her Alzheimer's. In the year of 1998, it's a dinner scene. She has an Alzheimer's episode. And in my film, how does the family go through it? Watching the grandmother have her Alzheimer episode and what do they feel? It is a short film. It's going to be like under 20 minutes. Um, and the whole film is my memory based on a true story of what did I endure watching my grandmother go through Alzheimer's when she was visiting America and how it affected me. I decided to recreate that memory to the best of my ability and really sinking in the fact that the Alzheimer's really gave me a sense of fear of forgetting everything and my loved ones and my family. And I started documenting my life through photography as much as I could. There's so many photos of my life. And I look at these photos now and look back at all the memories of my grandmother. And I think there's a sense of shame when I was younger, I didn't appreciate her because I was in that stage of my life where I wanted to be someone else. And that was in 1998. Um, I was a little bratty and my mom had a hard time controlling who I was. And I really emphasized that in the character and the writing of the child just bursting out in anger sometimes and then immediately wanting forgiveness. I try to stretch out the real moments of life that I feel like with Asian stories, not they don't focus on mental health often, especially elderly, and they don't really draw out certain characters when it comes to real life. You know, I think we all know if we have kids, kids can be they can be very expressive in their moment of feeling sadness or anger. But I was also feeling confused. I knew grandma was sick, but I didn't know what kind of sickness it was. And my mom really had a hard time explaining. Can you imagine trying to explain Alzheimer's to a 7 to 8 year old and getting them to grasp that concept? The only thing you can probably say is, sometimes older people will have this, they will be forgetful, but try to be nice and kind. Don't be angry. They're going through something that's confusing for them too. And in my story, I show love. I show love in food and in the family dinner, which is the opening scene of my film. You can find I Love You. It's called I Love You short film on Instagram. Um, I did do a campaign. I already shot the film and it's in the editing stages now. I'm very excited to hopefully have it completed before fall, like at least completed fully by the end of summer. Um, and then I'm also like writing out my other documentary and I'm writing my feature film about my mom's immigration story and what she endured from her immigration from Hong Kong to America and how did she feel? And I actually am going to set up an interview with her immigration lawyer who is retired to really hear the journey that my mom went through. And her immigration story is different from others in a little bit. Who did she fall in love with? Why was I born? How did it happen? Um, all these different things. And her story it's an emotional journey. And I'm also stretching out those emotions in life into a narrative and getting people to probably hopefully understand that the fight and power for a mother's love to their child is a very powerful one. And that is the main key theme of her story is that I realized how much my mom put me first before herself. And I know every mother will know what that's usually like to try to give as much opportunity to their child and to shield them from the difficulties of the world or protect them as best as they can. So
Mhm.
I'm writing that. That one's a hard one to write. I've been writing it for 5 years, and it's emotional for me to write, but I think it's also very cathartic.
Mhm.
The other docuseries that I'm writing on is called Halfway Here. It's my docuseries on biracials in the South, the generational gaps in what we've gone through as things changed over time, trying to represent different race and backgrounds and trying to also say, hey, these are all the different people in the in between. And we've gone through life and experiences. When you ask a biracial person to describe what does biracial mean to them, have at any point in their life did they ever feel like they wanted to be a single race? You know, what one of my themes that I'm writing on is the question of what are you? That question has been asked so many times in
Mhm.
my life. And I
Mhm.
decided to do a test with my friends who are single race. And I'm like, what are you? And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, if you were to answer that question, what are you? Some people would say, I'm a boy, I'm a girl, I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm American, Georgian, Atlantan? Question mark to all of those things. One person actually told me I'm human. And I'm like, those are all great answers. Now, if I answered the question, the exact same way. That's not the answer that people were looking for. The next follow-up question is, no, where are your parents from? That's
Mhm.
a very jarring,
Mhm.
bold question that some people have asked me, and I'm like, wow, what does that matter? What if I don't want to tell you now? Why do you want to even know? What's the point of this question? I'm American. Stop asking me where I'm from. And I really want to emphasize this in my docu-series of those that are biracial, and not only in the Asian side, but I wanted to really get this perspective of those in the Southern culture of all ethnic groups, and trying to see, like, you know what? What is the similarities and the common denominators? What do we all live for? And how do we keep pushing past the stigma? Because I was listening to this amazing podcast called Biracial Britain.
Mm.
And what they have said in that podcast and the audiobook, oh, I truly was amazed to hear of all the different stories. Inspiring, eye-opening, jarring, makes you a little bit angry, but it pushes us to really hear where humanity is. Has it changed in the last 100 years? And where are we going to go is the big question. And so my storytelling is really challenging controversial topics as well, and showcasing the good and the bad, because you need both to uh,
Mhm.
understand the future and understand people and listen to people's stories, and not be afraid to be curious. If you don't understand something, that's absolutely okay. Just ask questions in a genuine way with curiosity. A lot of people will probably answer the question of whatever you're curious about if you come at it with authenticness and genuineness. I still believe that it's absolutely okay to ask others if you want to know about their ethnic group and background, their culture. People are very proud to talk about it sometimes. It just depends. I'm always willing to share everything that my mom has shared with me, and I'm always still asking questions because, she was, Southern Chinese, or is Southern
Mhm.
Chinese, and
Mhm.
her perspective on food and things is just more Southern Chinese based. And my grandmother's love for cooking was instilled into my mom, so it's instilled into me. And women seem to really understand the taste and flavors of food. And my grandmother and I apparently love the same foods, even though I didn't get a chance to witness it. I love all the same ingredients she does. And I think that is what really connects me with her. So I'm glad to know I have a piece of my grandmother in me, even though I didn't get a chance to really get to know her because her Alzheimer's progressively got worse when I was younger.
Mhm.
So yeah, those are some of the projects that I'm slowly working on, and I hope to really share it with the world soon, and get to talk about all these different challenges of the world and the topics that I'm curious about.
Well, thank you, Naomi, for sharing your stories, your life, your goodness,
Thank
and
you.
that there's hope and life is worth living. Look forward to the next meal we'll share together in Atlanta.
Absolutely.
And thank you, everyone, for watching or listening to this episode of the Erasing Shame podcast. We'll add links in the show notes at erasingshame.com so you can connect and follow Naomi's good work. Bye-bye for now. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Erasing Shame podcast. We want you to live well, erase shame, and have honest conversations with safe people. If you're in a crisis and feeling overwhelmed, call 988 for the National Crisis Hotline, or text 741-741, and someone will respond to you immediately. In whatever situation you're in, there's hope, life is worth living, and we are cheering you on. Be well. Thanks for listening. connect with us at erasingshame.com if you can be of help.